Hey everyone, it is Morna Haste and Kim Stand Even, the hosts. Hi, the hosts of the Breathing Space. Welcome to this week's show. Before we get stuck into the show, let's take a moment to arrive. Take a breath. Just connect into this moment together, connect into this space, and just give yourself the opportunity to hang out with us for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes and receive whatever gem or little idea or little nugget of insight is going to show up in the show, because there's always one. I know there's always one for us, and there's always something that's going to emerge from these shows. Mm-hmm. Okay, what are we doing this week, Kim? I know what we're doing this week.
You tell me.
We are in a celebration week here in North America. So we've got the 1st of July, which is Canada Day, and then the 4th of July, which apparently is a big deal in America. And so a lot of stuff, goes on in this kind of week, and we're gonna tune in and chat about that this week. Last week we talked a little bit about what season are you in? What season are we in? The external season and the internal season. So we're going to follow it up this week by talking about. Actually, I want to call this week a season, because it is kind of a celebratory season. And we want to ask a question this week, which is, what do you want to appreciate? What do you want to appreciate as you're in this time of probably gathering with friends and family, or maybe not gathering with friends and family? Maybe you're scrolling social media and really tuning into what these kinds of days bring up, which isn't always positive. It brings up a lot of history, it brings up a lot of reality especially for marginalized folks, for people who maybe aren't part of family celebrations, folks who don't identify with the kinds of celebrations that go on these big days. And I know historically, from my context in New Zealand, our big kind of national celebration is called Waitangi Day, and it's a day of celebrating and talking about one of the founding documents of New Zealand, which is the Treaty of Waitangi. And it brings up, firstly, a lot of celebration, but it also brings up a lot of historical injustice around how the country was formed, and a lot of modern day injustice about access and inclusion and all kinds of different issues. So I think that's really what we want to talk about today, is really often in these times of celebrations, it's not all great. We've got these different things going on. So firstly, Kim, do you celebrate Canada Day? What do you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wouldn't say it's something that before I had kids, it was just something I observed and kind of followed along with. Now that I have little kids, we go over to celebrate the fireworks, and we kind of go to a festival, if you will, and just use it as a family day more than like an outwardly patriotic wag flagging. Yeah, it's interesting because I appreciate being alive in this country at this time where I have freedoms that my ancestors didn't. And yet I also want to acknowledge the history and the pain and the, what it can trigger in other groups. So I'm always kind of in this struggle of, I appreciate Canada. I think I think we have a really special thing here. And I really don't want to just ignore, what it might trigger. So I'm constant. It's not that it's that present on the day for me. It's more just a knowing, I think, of being not being ignorant to the fact that it's all, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I enjoy the family time of it. I think that's what it creates space for me, is to stop and just be in the moment with family.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. To be honest, these things kind of still sneak up on me because I'm not conditioned to the North American holiday cycle. We did celebrate Canada Day in New Zealand because, I'm married to a Canadian. I've got 2 Canadian children, and we would go around to a friend's house, and she always did a Canada Day celebration, and we would kind of make fake poutine and cobble together Canadian things with the things that were available, and we'd wear our lumberjack, what are they called, the lumberjack shirts, the swan, we call it a swan dry in New Zealand, but with flannel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'd wear the flannel and the toque, which is a hat, just to translate. And
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, and and kind of do our version of Canada Day. And I love that. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to come together, and it does actually trigger a couple of things in me. One is we can, in these traditional times when we're coming together with potentially family, that's not always rosy. There can be situations with our families that aren't great, and we might have to navigate challenging conversations. And I will share, I did this amazing interview last year with Karen Pullman, who's the founder of Live Another Way, and talking about how to manage some of those conversations. So I'll share that.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I'll share that on a page. It's funny. Lots of made up words today. I have not been drinking at lunchtime.
Celebration. Yeah. Are you celebrating already? Yeah.
I'm not celebrating early. So, I'll share that. How to navigate some of those more challenging conversations. And actually, often they come up because maybe we're at the table with people who have different political views, or have different viewpoints. And we're really, I think, conditioned to be quite adversarial in all levels, rather than inclusive. Okay, well, actually, how can we have a conversation that includes these different points of views? And of course, there are lines. And for me, my line is, if you're my lines are around racism, exclusion, bigotry, those kinds of things. I'll put a stake in the ground around. Other things, though, I think there's an opportunity to pause and reflect, and maybe see if another conversation is possible. The reason I bring that up is because I think so often, in my experience anyway, if I think about certain family members, and this is, I was about to say, one of the joys of living. If you're a member of my family and you're watching this, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about someone else. But in those kind of deep relationships, even in transient relationships, we decide who someone is.
Yes.
And then we're responding to this version of them that may not even be what's presenting in the moment, but we see what we expect to see. We hear what we expect to hear. So what does it feel like to actually pause and maybe welcome in different points of view? How can these things coexist together? And then can we celebrate something like Canada Day and also acknowledge the amount of work that needs to be done in a country like this to repair historical injustices, to create an inclusive society? And I do think these conversations can coexist together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really speaks to this idea of the positive and negative coexisting together, and combining so that we can feel it all at the same time, or within kind of the same moment, without having to break it all apart. So you can celebrate and be joyous and be with people and have a sadness or a grief around the past at the same time. And I think that's how I feel on Canada Day, or any celebration that I'm having, is that there's a great joy happening within me, but there's also a grief within me. at the same time. And I think that's where we can break open this conversation and say that, yes, that is possible. We don't have to have one or the other. We can have it. We can be open to conversations. We can have challenging conversations and have joy in it at the same time.
Yes, and I think that comes from an appreciative, we've been talking a little bit about appreciative inquiry in our own work. Mm-hmm. And what happens when we view things through that lens of, appreciating what we have, appreciating what could be possible from the space we're in, and I'm just noticing what's coming up for me, which is it's actually, I feel like we're not that skillful at having these two things coexist together. And I'm thinking like, if I'm going through a tough time, can I laugh at the same time? Can I be working on improving a situation, but also acknowledge? It's funny. I'm actually really noticing what's coming up for me, because I get into a kind of a bit of a fuzzy, stuck place.
It is fuzzy,
isn't it? It is fuzzy.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that we have spent a lot of time as a culture or society even articulating what that feeling is, because we're so compartmentalized in joy and negativity, or positivity and negativity, and what lives in those two compartments. But we haven't spent a lot of time acknowledging or asking ourselves, well, when I have these things coexisting, what is that definition, or how do I even articulate it? Because there's a feeling that comes with it, because we keep doing this, right?
Yeah.
We're doing this body thing. It's in there in our body, but our language isn't evolved enough to actually name it and describe it.
Right. And can I celebrate Canada Day and also be in the conversation around what's not working and what might need to change? And so I'm super curious about that, and I'm super curious about how that plays out in all aspects of life. And so just coming back to that question that I asked at the beginning, what was some version of what do you want to appreciate? Let's answer that question for ourselves in relation to this week of celebration, this time of celebrating what it means to be Canadian. And if you're watching from somewhere else, and I know we have many viewers from other places in the world, you could relate to this question from your own cultural point of view. What is it? What do you want to appreciate about being Canadian, Kim, or living in this country?
Yeah, immediately I'm brought back to the experience at Women Deliver, and just feeling such an appreciation or gratitude for where I live here in Canada compared to where some women are right now, and just in terms of living conditions and opportunities, and even just like fear around doing something like this, which would be a huge risk to someone personally in terms of like jail or being targeted. So I think for me, I'm so grateful that I have the abundance that I have in my life, and that there were opportunities. There's so many opportunities for me, and I'm going to say it as a white woman.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Woman, and I know, I know there's folks in my community that, because of what's happened in our history, don't have those same opportunities, and that so I appreciate that, and that doesn't go unnoticed or acknowledged, that I'm in this space because of how things have happened. And I just appreciate that I'm coming into knowing and acknowledgement around that, and that I'm raising my kids to see it and be appreciative too. Be like, hey, you won the lottery here, in a sense. the birth lottery in a sense. So I just
Wow.
want to come through life as appreciating that and not taking it for granted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for saying that. And gosh, that just brings up so much to me. And I think the first thing, and I do want to answer the question of what do I appreciate. Before I get there, I want to say something about what you've just said. It's so disgusting, actually, is the word I want to use. Revolting, disgusting, breaks my heart. This idea of the birth lottery and the skin color lottery, the ethnicity lottery, the cultural lottery, of, you know, where you're born and the color of your skin, and so many other factors that go into whether you have privilege in our society or not. And you know, I want to firstly acknowledge privilege and speak to it, that it's something that I am increasingly more aware of, particularly in North America, particularly the kinds of conversations that are starting to be had in this country and in America around white privilege and around unpacking what that means, and you know, what that means in terms of our place in society. And it's it's funny, I laugh because on every show, well, it's another show. It's a huge.
I think we're really just planting seeds, right, for what really matters to us, and kind of the direction that we're heading is really focusing on, like, what do we stand for and what matters to us and what we appreciate and what we want to bring to the table.
And I want to say that I don't take for granted the fact that I don't experience racism on a daily basis. I don't experience microaggressions on a daily basis because of the color of my skin. I don't experience intergenerational trauma because of my race and the color of my skin. So I want to, it feels super weird to even say I want to give thanks for that. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
So what I want to say in terms of what I appreciate is I appreciate my freedom. I appreciate the freedom that I have to come and live in this country with my Canadian husband, to also live in New Zealand, which is a very similar country. I appreciate the access that I have to resources. I appreciate that I have a voice, and that for the most part, I'm able to share that voice without fear. And I wish the same for my sisters around the planet, wherever they may be. And I, you know, want to continue to be committed to being in that conversation. I appreciate being alive at a time when these challenging and difficult conversations are more and more at the forefront.
Yeah, and it would have been so easy for us to do a show on, like, oh, what kind of cupcakes are you making for Canada Day?
So that's really funny, because anyone who knows me knows that there won't be any cupcakes. I won't be making any cupcakes. I didn't
know me either.
Cupcake making gene.
Yeah. No.
One of my daughters has it, but I don't have it. I'll eat them.
But I just want to say that I appreciate having this space to be able to just say these things that maybe we're all thinking and acknowledging within, but let's just say it out loud, that we can celebrate and be in this inquiry about what's happened, what's not working, and some of that discombobulation that we can feel too at the same time. So I agree.
And I would add to that what's still happening. And what is our role, particularly what is our role, given that we're two white folks having this conversation? What's our role as white people? What's our role now? Because I certainly don't want to continue being a colonizer. I don't want that to continue to be my role in the world, which is, you know, the role that white people have played, taking over, colonizing, you know, creating systems of separation and marginalization. And so how do we become, you know, again, I think this is just such a core thread of the work that we're doing in this space. The first thing is awareness. Being able to see it in some way, being able to actually lose our defensiveness around it.
Yeah. I love that. It's like, yeah, this is what this is. And being in the conversation. Yeah. And there's so much happening for me right now.
I know, right? And we're going to end the show.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to end the show. So happy whatever day you happen to be celebrating this week or not celebrating. We'd love to know what you appreciate. And you can mention that in the comments if you'd like to. And as I said, I'm going to share the interview I did with Karen Pullman, which I think may be useful for any folks who are, you know, getting together this week, or actually we will have already had Canada Day. This isn't live, by the way, as you've noticed. I think we said that at the beginning. I think we said that in the last show. You know, we're recording a few shows so that we can make space for life. So you will have either had Canada Day and you'll be reflecting on it when you listen to this, or if you're tuning in from North America, it'll be the 4th of July. So we'd love to hear from you. What do you want to appreciate? Okay, that's us, and we'll see you next week for the breathing space.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye.